ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Art of the Possible. As many of you know, Art of the Possible is something we started at the beginning of the pandemic to really continue to push forward, be positive, and look at what's the art of the possible. This evening, I'm with both a friend, colleague, mentor, inspiration. I've known this individual, Michelle Hobby, for many, many years. And so tonight, and this evening, what we're talking about is diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And in our industry today, believe it or not, we still have some work to do. Just to start off with, annually, according to Workforce Management, there's about $8 billion invested in DE&I every year. However, the real question is, does it really translate over to our industry, the events industry, meeting planning, hotels, hospitality, all of that? And I think as we go through the next 30 minutes with you, we'll have some discoveries. And more importantly, I hope that when we finish our 30 minutes together, that you'll have some opportunities to go back to your organizations and really take a look and move from sort of the unconscious to the conscious. Be aware of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and the impacts, and not only what we're not doing, but what we can do about bringing together. So again, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
For having me.
Of course. So Michelle, tell us a little bit about you. How long have you been in the industry? Where you're at now? National Industries of the Blind?
So I have been with National Industries for the Blind for about 14 years. I've been doing this probably for about 14 years. And it's been quite different for me from being an African-American woman. The challenges are a little bit different from the normal meeting planner. We know that meeting planners that look like me are not out there. There's not a lot of us. As a matter of fact, it's only like 8.6% of the meeting planners are African-American out of 9,000 meeting planners. That's kind of odd, right?
That's a lot. That's not representative. How's that?
It's not representing us at all.
That's
and
right.
We need to make sure that we're including all of us. I mean, we want people that are like me or like you, we want to be able to include everyone.
So I think the question is always, we're very busy. We're doing our annual programs. And as soon as we finish, we all know we have to go to the next one. And we're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I think, where do we start?
Oh, that's the key word, start. You just start. One of my colleagues said, you just start. And that's what you do. You start. You look at your panelists. You see if they're diverse. You check to see if you can include DEI on your program and make it a part of the general session, make it a part of a panelist. Make sure that you're looking at all avenues and looking at everyone. The key word, and you'll hear it a lot in our conversations, is everyone. If you include everyone, you pretty much can have diversity a long ways.
So what I'm hearing you say, Michelle, is about getting started, but also you mentioned something about your speakers. So is that an area maybe where, I can tell you, like some of the conferences that I've attended, you look at the speakers and it's kind of pale, stale, and male, right? And that's not my term. It's a term I'm using for someone else, but I think it's certainly appropriate because I think that's the best way to really review your program, right?
Exactly.
Is to say, hey, gosh, let me look at this. And if it looks pretty consistent, you may want to step back and start with just your panelists. But then from there, what would you suggest maybe as a next step outside of your speakers? For instance, are there some resources that people could use or individuals could use?
Yes, there are plenty of resources. You can do the MBA, which is Minority Business Enterprise, WBA, which is Women Business Women business owned, and then you have veterans. So there's plenty of resources that you can actually find diversity in. You have the LGBTQ that you can also find. So when you say, is there places to look? There's plenty of places to have diversity in your meetings.
That's right. And maybe even like, so some organizations may or may not have, let's say, employee resource groups. Is that an area that you could pull from?
Sure. Yes,
Okay.
your HR department, employee resources group. We have even talked about doing surveys and having surveys and, making, it's a way of reaching out and seeing what you're missing.
Yep, absolutely. So here I am as a meeting planner, you are as a meeting planner, right? And you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to, become more inclusive. And I think nowadays that we're really talking not just about, race and gender, but we've sort of moved beyond that, right? So, for instance, your organization, National Industries of the Blind, so we really got to move past just thinking about one thing. I mean, there's other disabilities like autism and things that maybe you can't see.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, but with that, then you're trying to do this, I think the question becomes, what about your leadership? You're struggling and you're trying to work through things and you're not getting any support. What do you do?
So I say that you go find someone on your leadership team that's dealt with diversity or had a something that affected them personally with DEI. And I think that's a good way of pulling in someone from your leadership team. Once you have an advocate, it's always easier to present to other people. Do surveys, have surveys to go out with your employees, see what you're missing. As I just stated before, you always say you want them to uphold to what they're saying that they're going to do. If they're not doing it or not walking the walk, pull them out, call them, tell them, okay, you're not doing it in a very nice way, but just make sure that they understand. And I think, no company wants to feel like their employees are not being listened to. So if you do that, I think that's a good way of getting your leadership or, C-suite involved.
Sure. And what about, maybe some other things, I'm just throwing this out there. What about, if they're not listening, most of your C-suites are usually incentivized in some way, maybe presenting a business case to say, hey, this is good for recruiting, good for retention. We really want to market to these individuals. Here's what it's going to do to our top line. Here's what it's going to do to our bottom line. And I hate to say that, right? Because these are people, right? These are humans that we're trying to talk to and include, but yet in order to make a difference, we've really got to make a business case for it.
I agree with you on that. You're coming from the business side of it, so that of course you would say that. But yes, a business case would be excellent because businesses always want to know their bottom line and what they're gonna, how is this gonna help them?
Yep. And I think along there, same lines though, is, when you look at organizations, for instance, right? When you look at the demographics of your hourly associates, maybe, right, versus your leadership, a lot of times, especially in our hospitality industry today, it's not really representative.
Exactly.
The numbers are sort of staggering when you look at them. And I think that's one thing to do. But the other is how do we move the dial, right? I think today with meeting planners, are there ways that we can make an sort of influence the industry? And I'm just throwing some things out to you. What about when you're doing an RFP, is that something that?
Sure. When you're doing an RFP with CVent, they have in there where you can put your questions in and you can say, how important is DEI to you? With the hotels or others, you can actually, when you're deciding who's going to deliver your flowers or who's going to be a part of your setup team, you can look for a minority-owned business or a woman-owned business or a veteran-owned business. There's ways of bringing in diversity into just that part of it. And that's the beginning of it.
Yeah. And then what about when you're going out and you're actually doing a hotel tour, right? Are there things maybe that you would ask, for instance, managing or dealing with multiple groups in a venue or a hotel, and you've got to have a gender neutral bathroom and sort of that checklist thing. When you go into a hotel, what are you looking at from your view?
For me, is first is safety, because I'm working for National Industries for the Blind, so we have to make sure that the surrounding areas are safe. And then the small things: when we're putting them in a hotel room, is it going to be close to the elevators, or the distance of the meeting rooms? Is it going to be too far for them to be able to go all the way around to the other side just to get to a meeting room? So those are the small things, and it's taken into consideration. And another thing, when we were doing meetings, probably about 2 years ago, we had a mom that was a maternity mom that needed to breastfeed, and we made nursing rooms for our attendees. Yep. So that's something that we would not normally do, but we made accommodations. So that's still thinking of everyone.
That's right. And then what about just from the recruiting perspective, or moving past sort of the standard, well, can they really do that? I mean, have you ever had a blind meeting planner or someone who's visually impaired?
Oh, yes. Actually, our company organization back in 2018 decided to open up an event center, and we decided that we would start to recruit and train people who are blind and visually impaired to be meeting planners. And I have someone that is a colleague of mine now that works our event center totally by itself. So
wow. And they were amazing,
able to do things that I can't do, because I can't look at and totally say what's accessible and what's going to be good, but he can give me pointers on what's good and what's not good. So.
And for those of you in the Virginia, DC metro area, you may have just heard some thunder. So we have a little bit of sound effects there. Going back to sort of the resources, are there opportunities to partner with your clients or your customers or vendors in regards to, like, how would you create more inclusivity from that? Like, so recruiting and hiring and that kind of stuff.
It's called networking. I mean, it's pretty much like if I have something open and I'm going to call a federal conference and I'm going to say, is there someone that you could send over for this position? Or is there someone that you know? Or likewise, if you know something that a job is opening up at federal conference, is there someone? So you can use your networking or the people that you're around to bring in resources or bring in different people. And I think the biggest thing is giving people a chance. Someone that you wouldn't think that could do it or couldn't possibly do it, give them a chance. And you'll always see that it'll work out.
So we kind of opened, Michelle, with a little bit of the background as far as like the numbers as far as meeting planners go. Can you tell a little bit more about your story as an African-American woman and sort of what you've kind of worked through?
So of course, we know, as I said before, that it's a little different for African-American. We're pretty much behind the eighth ball in all positions. I can just be honest about it. But as I can say with me, it's been kind of challenging because me knowing my work and knowing that I know what I know, I've been like my judgment of what I do or my expertise have been questioned at times, or easy for someone to just say no to me. And it can be very discouraging at times, but I've learned to work through it, excel in my work, make sure that I'm doing what I need to do. And it has speaking for itself because I'm still at my job. I've been there for a while. And, it's just a matter of jumping over the hurdles. Don't let them disturb you and keep moving forward.
And I think going back to your original comment of just getting started, something that I like to share about Michelle is that Michelle just started doing public speaking, and she was asked to join a panel, and she just jumped in and she just did it and started. And since then, she's sort of been on the speaking circuit. So thank you and big applause to you and congratulations for all the work you've done.
Thank you, Phil.
So another question: what about you're a meeting planner. I think it's like one of the top most stressful jobs in the world. You're now trying to incorporate DE&I. What do you do to recharge? What are some things that would help you recharge?
Relax, relax, and relax. And you have to learn to sometimes give up some things. You have to be able to say, I'm going to delegate this. Not always try to be the superstar, superhero, because it doesn't always work out. Being able to delegate and knowing that you can delegate and have someone to take over your responsibilities sometime, it's great. It gets you back recharged and you're back in the mode. You're back into doing what you do best.
Yep. So just to jump a little bit as far as like the attendee engagement and registration, what are some things that you can do in that process? Because obviously once you've registered, you've kind of lost your opportunity to understand your attendee. What are some things that you may want to do in your registration process to help?
Good question. I would say when you're doing your registration, it's good to put your questions in there from the beginning. Do you have any special needs or special requirements? Do you need to be close to an elevator, or just little things that you can add to your registration page, that you have that data right from the beginning, and you're able to make all the accommodations that are needed just right from the jump. Is there going to be a wheelchair? Do you need to have enough space in between? Or
sure.
It's just the small things that makes everyone feel like they're included.
And what about is there an opportunity to have like an open box for comments or
open box for comments?
Okay.
And I just the other day, I even heard at networking that they actually were going to give the person a call to allow them let me give you a call to get more details, which is great because that's really personal there. You're really giving that attendee a personal experience.
And what about, since we're on the topic of technology, is technology really where it should be to support DE&I?
Okay, you would ask me that. I would say no, because there are so many things that let me just say this. With technology, they do the basics. They check the box.
Right.
And for me, it's a little different because there are a lot of things that with accessibility that we're ahead of the game with it, because we're testing every day, all day. And a great example was in our fall conference when the pandemic first came about. We had to use a company, and this is all new to us, and we had to use someone that we didn't know about. And we tried to give them like our 503 compliance department to kind of help them. And they said, no, we got it. Well, it didn't work out. It wasn't the best, but now we know, and we're making sure that we have someone from our team to work with the people. So I would say that they have a little ways to catch up, and you got to kind of force them to do it.
And so is that something that you personally would be involved in, or do you have individuals from NIB?
We have a whole department that would actually the guy that works with me is my right-hand person for. He's
Gotcha.
The person that does all of my accessibility testing. When we go to site visits, he makes sure that everything is accessible for someone who is blind. So he's like my right-hand person for that.
Wow. So for you, because you're not necessarily looking through that lens, having that individual is pretty critical, I assume, and having the whole team.
Very.
Gotcha. So when we're looking at meetings and we're looking to place our business, we talked about this a little bit, in regards to DE&I and our RFPs and going out to hotels. Are there anything specific, like would you look in their marketing material, or would you just ask them? What are some things that you might do to sort of prepare individuals?
Pretty much look at their marketing material. Look at who's at the front desk or who's in management. It's several ways that you can look at how they're handling DE&I. But definitely their marketing materials, it speaks for itself. You always tend to see more of you and less of us, or less of people who are blind or disabled. So I think that's a start in it. And then you just ask questions. When you're doing your site visit, you ask them, where are you at with DE&I?
Right.
Yeah.
So, because you're right, because normally when you look at marketing material, you see the grand ballroom and chandeliers and these spectacular bathrooms, but you really don't often see someone maybe in a wheelchair or maybe, that does have some sort of impairment or challenge, right? So, I mean, I think that's definitely a takeaway is, go back to your organizations. And that's just not for hotels, right? That has to apply for registration and your attendees. And it's just really making sure that it is representative. And maybe your organization, is not necessarily diverse, but is it really bad to continue to sort of promote and make people conscious?
No, I think it's great to make people conscious. It's nothing wrong with being aware, and you have to be aware. The more you do it, the more people are conscious of doing it.
Sure. Yep. One of the things we were doing some reading the other day, and I don't want to sound like doom and gloom. Within our hospitality and hotel industry itself, Forbes puts out a top DE&I companies, and there were a couple organizations that were like, for instance, Marriott International was number 27th. Next, followed by Hyatt, and then Intercontinental were sort of the top 3 hotel chains in regards to DE&I. And so maybe, when you're doing that RFP, you may want to consider, hey, what organizations are really focused on DE&I? So whether it's placing a meeting or maybe in your personal travel, you really want to support those organizations that are focused and moving things along. I mean, is it fair to say, Michelle, that really DE&I is more about bringing people together?
I would say it's exactly what bringing people together and being including everyone. We don't often do that. I think even I think I've said before, even with it's like one size fit all. It's not a one size fit all. We should have a multitude of people that can be included into what we're doing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, bringing people together, lifting them up. And is it sort of like, we get comfortable and we go to the same restaurant and we order the same plate meal, whatever special it is.
Yes.
And we have to kind of get out of that sort of routine, right? We've got to maybe feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
To really make a difference.
Right.
So a couple of final closing questions, because we're going to be hitting our 30 minutes here. And again, I want to say thank you, Michelle, for being here. But what would you say that your number one thing out of your career has really been sort of a guiding light for you to sort of break all the norms? I mean, you've done a lot. I mean, you're an inspiration to so many people now. How have you done it over the past 14 years?
I think it's knowing the right people and just saying that I can, and no one's going to stop me from doing it. You have to have that I can, I will do attitude. It has kept me going for this far, and just being in the right place at the right time and knowing the right people.
And I mean, with NIB, I mean, I don't know, my understanding is that they're pretty inclusive, but I think you have some pretty good leadership.
We have excellent leadership. They listen. We're definitely doing our DEI now. We have a total new program that's concentrating on it. So we're on the ball with it.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you again for joining us this evening for DE&I and more importantly with Michelle Hobby. She's amazing. And I hope that you'll tune in again next time for our next Art of the Possible. Thank you and have a good night.